Hi guys! Welcome back. This is the second week of online LABrary, and if you saw our first week's episode last week, we did an activity where we did some brainstorming, and we divided a piece of paper and we put on one side land and one side sea, and then we gave ourselves a couple of minutes and we just thought of all the different animals that we could think of that live on the land and all that live in the sea. And it's just called brainstorming. We're not really thinking, we're just doing. We're just putting down the first things that come into our head. And then we did some more brainstorming where we actually took a piece of paper and we took an animal from the land and one from the sea, and we squashed them together and made new things. And then again, we were just putting them together as fast as we could. So a few of the ones I had a cuttle pig, which was a half cuttlefish, half pig. I had the cat clam, which was half cat, half clam. The bearded dragonfish. But my favorite one was called the giant squeep, which was half giant squid, half sheep. And so what I did as part of that is that I made myself some questions. What is it called? It's called the giant squeep. How big is it? It's like 40 feet wide. Where does it live? It lives deep under the sea, but it comes up to eat. How long does it live? They live a long time. The best, is the creature threatened? And it says, yes, certain things can possibly hurt my squeep, and I figured out what it eats, what it does for its defense. And so I thought about the squeep, and then lastly I drew it. So here was my squeep. And so by the time we got to the actual activity, I really thought about what this guy is going to look like. What is a squeep? What does it need to live? And then I got some craft stuff together, and I have some photos here of putting my squeep together. And so I used a water or like a soda bottle for its body, and then I used duct tape that I wrapped around it with the sticky side out, and then I put cotton balls all around it because the squeep is again half sheep, and its wool is both keeps it warm and protected, and it's actually how it eats. It like sucks in plankton and stuff through its wool. And then it also has 8 tentacles, so I stuck on the sticky side out, I put ribbon for tentacles, and then I had some googly eyes around. I put some googly eyes, and I made some straws for its neck, and we gave it a little tail, and then here it is. It's kind of and then I wanted it to be a little green because all the seaweed goes through the white wool. And so I got some colored dye, some food coloring, and I put it in some water, and I sprayed it. It wasn't the smartest thing to do. I should have sprayed it first, because once I started spraying it, the cotton started falling off. But you live and learn. So this is my squeep. He's got 8 tentacles that he moves. This is how he goes through the water. So he goes like this to move around. And then he'll go up to the surface and he'll drink some air, and he has air so that it keeps him afloat and buoyant, but then he'll let bubbles out from his skin, and that's how he'll sink down, and he lives down at the bottom of the ocean. So again, when I built the squeep, when I went to build him, I knew what it was. I knew everything he had to have, so when I was making choices, I knew what he needed. And so here's our squeep. And so I don't know if you've made one at home. If so, you'll have something at home, some sort of magical, mythological creature that you've invented. This is something that's never existed before, and we've made it. But now, so this is what I did. This is kind of what we did for last week. So for this week, we have a whole new challenge. So, what we're going to do for this week's activity is we're going to kind of take what we did last week to the next level. So we talked about making our own mythological creature. Now we need to think about what it's called its habitat. And a habitat is just sort of the place that an animal lives. And so where does it live, and why does that place where it lives, why does that make sense for the animal? So I have a couple of examples to think about. One here. So one animal that would have its own habitat is a snail. So it has a habitat sort of built in. I mean, wherever it lives, it can always hide. It's got a protective hard shell. So that's one place it can hide. It's kind of almost got its own habitat. But another animal, the lobster, that has a hard shell, but is still vulnerable to prey, to things trying to eat it. When it lives underwater, it'll hide. It'll find like a crack in the rock and it'll go hide, or under a rock. So even though it swims around, when it needs a place to hide, it'll still find somewhere. And then we've got another thing. There's the bear. There's the bear, huh? So a bear has its own habitat. When it needs to, what they call hibernate, it'll build what's called a den. And a den is often, they'll find a cave, or they'll find like a tree that has fallen down and it's made sort of a hole, and they'll dig inside there and then bury themselves in there to help keep themselves warm. It's also where they'll go to have their cubs, or something like rabbits. Rabbits have their own habitat. So in winter, when they need to get out of the cold over winter, what they will do is they will dig a series of holes, and almost like tunnels. And many rabbits can live together, and they call it a warren. So they'll dig holes, and then they have little places, tunnels with little places in them that they can all live. So this is what's called their habitats. And so animals adapt, and they make habitats based on what they need. So we're going to think about a habitat for the creature we've just created. So again, I have my squeep, and I'm going to think about I've thought about like where it lives, that sort of thing. But now I have to think about like where does it live? How does it sleep? Where would it go? And so I've kind of thought about it a little bit, and then the one main predator of my squeep are schools of tuna. The schools of tuna, they gang up on my squeep. And so it needs to hide. So I am going to make its own habitat, my squeep habitat. And so the things I have of just, again, general sort of craft supplies, stuff that you have around the house. I've got some cardboard, I found some string, I've got some ribbon, some glue, some tape. I have a little Play-Doh from the activity I was doing. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just what kind of stuff I'm going to use. But I first have to think about where does it live? Where would it hide? And then I also need to know kind of how big it is. So I've got a ruler. So if you have a ruler at home, the ruler this one has 12 inches on it. So I'm going to measure my squeep here so I know how big of a habitat I have to make. And so, wow, it's almost exactly 12 inches. So it's about 12 inches long, and it's about, let's see, how big is he around there? About 5 inches high, and it's kind of circular, so like 12 by 5 by 5. So I would need something at least that big if I was going to make something for my squeep to hide in. So that is the challenge for next week. So if you've made something last week, your own mythological creature, now you're going to find something, you're going to make something for it to hide in. But again, we're kind of thinking about, where does it live? What kinds of things would be available for it to live in? Like this thing lives in the sea, so it's obviously got to be somewhere in the sea. that it can live. It's not going to be able to go on the land. So what kinds of things are available to me on the sea? Does it need to stay warm? If it needed to stay warm, like the bear or something, how would it do that? If it needed to be deep in the sea versus not as deep, is that going to change things for it? Does it need to hide? The other things that you can think about is like, once you start making your habitat, you gather some stuff around, start making it, and then maybe even think about, what stuff haven't I thought about? So maybe thinking of new and different ways that you could make this work. And is it, and see how stable it is. Can you put things on it? If the wind came by, or if you dropped it, would your habitat fall apart? Does your animal need to be camouflaged? Meaning, some things will, in the sea, they'll bury themselves, and so you can't really see them, or they'll hide somewhere where they don't stick out very much. So if you think your animal or your creature needs to be camouflaged, how would you decorate your habitat? And then, does your habitat, will it hold one animal? Does it need to be able to hold a family? Does it need to hold a whole community like rabbits? Or does it just need to live like a bear, where a bear might be in its den with a mama bear and her cubs? So these are all things that you can think about. Where animals live, and you can go online or some books and just learn a little bit more about animals, where they live. Think about where we live. What's our habitat? You can kind of think about that and talk about, what is a habitat? What makes a good habitat? And what, more importantly, now that you've thought about something, you've thought about making your own thing, what's going to be the perfect habitat for your mythological creature? And if you didn't make one last week, or if you didn't see last week's video, no problem. You can just think of almost any animal that exists already, or make up your own animal, or even think of an imaginary animal, like where would a unicorn live? Make a habitat for a unicorn. Where would it have to sleep? Where would it stay protected? How would it stay warm? These are all kinds of things. Once you start answering all these questions, then you can make it. Don't start making things until you know the answers of what it needs. Okay, so that is your challenge for next week. I am going to start building my habitat for my squeep, and next week I'll show you what I made. And again, if you make anything, if you make a habitat, if you make a mythological creature, I would love to see them. I would love to put them on these videos. So I'll put the information down here about how you can share it on social media. You can also send it to me as an email, and you don't have to send a picture of yourself in there. I would just love to see what you've made and be able to share it with people. So send me that, and that's it. We'll see you guys next week. Have a fun challenge. See ya.